For painting our first layer today, we're going to be using our tempera paint cakes that are just like this. Remember, when we use these today, we're going to want our nice chisel-edged brush, like we've been seeing in our demo videos in class, and a nice round-tipped pointed brush. When you mix your colors for these, remember you're going to want to add some water to the middle, and you're going to want to stir it just in that little circle like it's soup. You don't want too much water in it, just enough to start making some paint on your paintbrush, right? I want you to pick just a couple of colors today to keep your color scheme sort of the same and thematic. I'm going to pick reds to work with today. And today we're just going to work on doing some of our base colors and brushing techniques. So remember, I'm going to go around on some of these and kind of let that chisel edge do its job a little bit. I want you to practice using the brush. Remember, we can pull it and sideways, and we can pull it down towards us. But we shouldn't push it up and away from us too much. We don't want those bristles to separate. We want them to stay nice and lined up together. So this is just going to be our practice layer on here so that we get the feel for what that brush is going to do. You can already start seeing some of those fun little strokes and patterns in there. Add a little bit more to my red. And I'm going to turn my paper over here. I'll work on the tulip. I think I had a few other little ones. So I'm just going to use the corner of my brushes for those. That one there. I'm going to change my colors for these two flowers. I'm going to switch over to a yellow, so I have to get some water mixed up in my yellow over here. For these ones, I put that chisel straight down, and I kind of do an oval, a little oval swivel to fill those in. Notice the movement is very slight in my hand. My hand doesn't move much at all to fill in those little spaces. You want to keep your movements tiny and short. So you're going to continue filling in all of your first layer today for your design. Okay, once I have my first layer complete today, just like this, I'm going to put it on the drying rack so that I can work on it next time. Okay, now I've let this dry, so I'm going to start adding another layer to this. Like when we watched in our Rosemaling videos from before, these have different layers. There's some areas that are darker, some that are lighter. I'm going to use that same method of getting my tempera paint cakes wet by going in a circle. And then I'm going to find the areas that I want darker. I'm not going to paint the whole section again. I'm just going to paint some single sides of that section. And as you can see, it's going to give it more of that detailed look. Not doing the whole thing, just adding in some brush strokes, some little stripes, if you will, to make it look like it's more layered. And I did that one with the blue on top of the blue. And you can see how it's starting to really work out. The other thing I can go back and do after I do the blue is I can get my white paint wet. I'm swirling that over here on the side in that stirring motion. And I could even go back in on the opposite sides and put in some white stripes if I wanted to. They don't show up a whole bunch, but just enough to give you the impression that there's a lot of texture there, or brush stroke there, kind of like that. You're going to go through each of your sections and add in some of those little details. So now that I've added in all of my details, I'm going to let this layer dry before I work on the background. All right, for our background, we're going to be looking at coloring with Sharpie. We could do this with paint, but because there are so many tiny fine lines in here we want to protect, we're going to do it with a Sharpie. That way I'm going to make sure my Sharpie's nice and point. I don't want to push too hard on here because I don't want to dull that point on my Sharpie. I want to be careful. And before I even start coloring everything in the background, I am going to outline everything. I want you to notice how slowly I'm going around the edges because I don't want to make any mistakes and cover up all of that beautiful painting that I did before on that surface. This is also a great time to take the opportunity. If you go out a little too far, you can go back in and color around it, or if you went outside some of those lines while you were painting, to just go over on top of that paint and cover it up with that black Sharpie, because then nobody will know that you accidentally went outside the lines. It's a nice little way to cheat on cleaning up your lines, but only if you're taking the time to go around them nice and slow. And again, I'm not pushing hard, because if I push hard, it's going to dull the tip and it might start making scratchy lines. Like if you go too hard like this, you'll notice it starts making like dots and kind of straight lines instead of being smooth. You want to make sure you're going nice and smooth. Did you notice how I didn't quite go to my edge here? That's because I wanted to be able to slow down, go back in, and fill it in nice and careful so I didn't accidentally bump any of my paint. That was on purpose that I did that. Same thing here. I would leave a little gap around that edge since I'm doing larger strokes with my marker to make sure that I didn't hit that other flower. Don't want to ruin that. Extra special little step to take care of it. Gonna step back, take a look at all of it. I like it. I think I'm going to do a few more little accent marks though in some of these areas that are still just a little plain. So to go back in and put some accent marks now, I'm gonna use the Sharpies that would match those similar colors, and in some of those areas that maybe aren't quite so vibrant, I could go in and do just a little bit more, just to give it a little extra oomph in some of those areas. Now you're drawing on top of the tempera paint, which acts like a sponge. It's going to want to soak in anything that you draw on there. So go nice and slow, otherwise it's not going to leave a mark. You have to give it time for that ink to flow down into the pen. I might do another set over here. And again, it's not a lot. I don't want it to be a big drastic difference, but I want it to be something that's nice to look at. Something that gives it a little extra pattern that I could do with a fine tipped paintbrush, but since we've put our paints away already, Sharpies are the next best thing. So when we mount this, we're going to be taking this and using my super special scissors here and cutting around the edge very carefully. See how it makes that really neat pattern in there? I want to make sure I'm cutting onto the black part of my plate. Don't want to leave the white. And I have to go slow, and I want to be really careful that I'm matching up the edge of those scissors to the same shape as I'm going around. It ends on a round shape, so I have to match up that round shape of my scissors to the round snippet on my paper. That means this takes a little bit longer to cut out because you don't get as much of a cut out of those pair of scissors. It's not quite as long. It's a little bit shorter. So I'll have more open and close action with those scissors. But it's going to be so worth it to have that pretty edge around my plate. And I'm also very careful. You notice the scissors kind of stay in the same place. They open and close. I line up that groove. But the part I'm turning is the actual paper on there. Extras out of the way. And now I bring in my paper. It's an accent paper because I picked up some of this color. I don't want to do black on black. I want to do something tiny that I used in here. I'm going to glue it down on here in a special way as well. I am going to use these little foam core pieces to help it kind of pop off the page when it's displayed. That gives it a little bit of extra depth, and it's fun for the viewers to see. It makes it look a little bit more realistic. It gives it some form when it's presented. Just because artwork is flat when we work on it doesn't mean we have to present it flat. We could always pop it up off that background, or we could stand it up on its edge. Those are always fun options in art. So now I have each of those glued onto the back of my artwork. Then I'm going to put a spot of glue on each one because I'm going to flip it over and then stick it down onto my presentation piece. I'm going to be careful and gentle, just like this. And of course, before it goes on the drying rack, I'm going to write my name on it. Nice and neat, because I'm proud of my artwork, and I want everybody to know who made it.